The stagecoach thundered across the dusty plains of Nebraska Territory, its wheels kicking up clouds of amber dirt as Willow O'Malley clung desperately to the leather strap hanging from the ceiling. Spring of 1868 had brought unexpected rains, making the typically arid landscape a treacherous maze of muddy paths and sudden drops, each jolt threatening to toss her against the hard wooden frame or onto one of her fellow passengers. "First time out west, miss?" asked an elderly woman seated across from her, voice steady despite the violent rocking of the coach. Willow nodded, trying to maintain her composure. "Yes, madam. Heading to Cottonwood Springs to take a position as the new schoolteacher." The woman smiled knowingly. Brave girl. Not many would journey alone to the frontier. Willow didn't feel brave. At 22, she felt desperate. After her father's passing and the subsequent loss of their Philadelphia home, the teaching position out west had been her only option. The advertisement had promised accommodation, a modest salary, and the chance to bring education to children who desperately needed it. What it hadn't mentioned was the grueling 3-week journey that had left her exhausted, homesick, and questioning her decision. As the stagecoach crested a hill, Cottonwood Springs came into view, a scattered collection of wooden buildings, some with painted fronts, others weathered raw by sun and wind. A church steeple rose above the other structures, and around the town, small farms dotted the landscape, green with spring crops. Almost there, the driver called from his perch. Relief flooded through Willow until a sharp crack split the air. The coach lurched violently to one side, and the horses whinnied in panic. "Wheels broken," the driver shouted. "Everybody hold on." The stagecoach tilted, then began to slide down the muddy embankment. Willow's stomach lurched as they picked up speed. Her fellow passengers screamed, bags tumbled from overhead racks, and through the window, she saw the driver fighting desperately to control the frightened horses. With a sickening crunch, the coach slammed to a halt against a large boulder. The impact threw Willow against the door, which sprung open on impact. She tumbled out, landing hard on the wet ground. Instinctively, she scrambled away from the teetering coach, but a sharp tug held her back. Her skirt had caught in the broken wheel, the fabric tangled hopelessly in the splintered wood and metal. Panic rose in her chest as she pulled frantically at the material. The horses were still stamping and snorting, threatening to drag the coach and her with it at any moment. The other passengers were crawling out the opposite side, and the driver was preoccupied with calming the team. No one had noticed her predicament. "Help!" she cried, her voice thin with fear. "Please, someone help me." The sound of hoofbeats approached rapidly from the direction of town. A rider appeared, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. In seconds, he had dismounted and was beside her, assessing the situation with calm efficiency. "Easy now," he said, his voice deep and steady as he drew a knife from his boot. "Don't move. You're going to be free in just a moment." Willow froze, watching as he carefully sliced through the fabric of her skirt where it had become entangled in the wheel's mechanism. His hands moved with surprising gentleness for their size, his fingers calloused but precise. "There," he said, stepping back as the last thread gave way. "You're free." Finally able to move, Willow scrambled backward and looked up at her rescuer. He stood over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. His eyes, startlingly blue against his tanned face, assessed her with concern. Dark blonde hair fell in waves to his shoulders beneath a worn leather hat. He wore simple clothes, a faded blue shirt, denims, and a leather vest, but the star pinned to his chest caught her eye. "Sheriff Thornton Forrester," he introduced himself, extending a hand to help her up. "Welcome to Cottonwood Springs, though I reckon this isn't quite the arrival you were hoping for." His touch was warm and steady as he pulled her to her feet. Willow became acutely aware of her disheveled appearance, her torn skirt, mud-streaked traveling suit, and hair that had come loose from its pins. "Willow O'Malley," she replied, attempting to brush the worst of the mud from her clothing. "I'm the new schoolteacher." Something flickered in the sheriff's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "Miss O'Malley, town's been expecting you." He glanced at the stagecoach, which now leaned precariously against the boulder. "Looks like you all had a rough journey." "The wheel broke," Willow explained unnecessarily, following his gaze to the damaged coach. Sheriff Forrester nodded. "That trail gets treacherous after rain." He turned to address the driver and other passengers who were gathering their scattered belongings. Anyone hurt? The driver shook his head. Just shaken up, Sheriff. Coach is another matter. Won't be going anywhere soon. I'll send Tucker with the wagon to fetch your passengers and their belongings, the sheriff offered. We'll get everyone to town and sort things out there. While he spoke with the driver, Willow took stock of her situation. Her trunk containing all her worldly possessions was strapped to the back of the coach, apparently undamaged. But her reticule with her papers and the little money she had was nowhere to be seen. The sheriff returned to her side. You all right, Miss O'Malley? Any injuries I should know about? I'm fine, thank you, she replied, though her ankle throbbed where she'd twisted it in the fall. But I can't find my reticule. It has my letter of appointment and what little money I brought with me. Sheriff Forrester scanned the ground around them, then walked a few paces to where a small beaded bag lay half buried in mud. He retrieved it, wiping it as clean as possible on his sleeve before handing it to her. Thank you, Willow said, relief evident in her voice as she checked the contents. Everything was there, though somewhat damp. Miss O'Malley, called a voice from the road. A wagon approached, driven by a young man with a friendly face. Behind him rode several men on horseback. That's Tucker with the wagon, Sheriff Forrester explained. And some of the townsfolk who saw the commotion. They'll help get everyone to town. He studied her for a moment. You sure you're all right to travel? You look a bit pale. Willow straightened her shoulders. I'm perfectly capable of continuing to town, Sheriff. It's only my skirt that's damaged, not me. A hint of a smile crossed his face. Never doubted your capability, Miss O'Malley. Just your comfort. He gestured toward his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion waiting patiently nearby. My horse can carry us both to town quicker than the wagon. The schoolhouse has living quarters attached that have been prepared for you, and Mrs. Holloway from the general store left some food there this morning. The thought of reaching her destination sooner and having a moment to compose herself before meeting the townspeople was appealing. Still, Willow hesitated. Is that proper, Sheriff Forrester? This time, his smile emerged fully, transforming his serious face. In Philadelphia? Probably not. In Cottonwood Springs? It's just practical. Besides, half the town already saw me ride out here, and the other half will see us ride in. Your reputation will remain intact. After ensuring her trunk would be delivered to the schoolhouse, Willow found herself perched sideways on the sheriff's horse, her torn skirt arranged as modestly as possible, with Sheriff Forrester seated behind her. One strong arm circled her waist to keep her secure as they rode toward town. The school term starts in 2 days, he informed her as they traveled. Town council's mighty pleased to have a qualified teacher. Last one left after just a month couldn't handle the children, apparently. Willow's anxiety, momentarily forgotten in the excitement of the accident, returned full force. Are they particularly difficult students? The sheriff chuckled, the sound resonating through her where his chest pressed against her back. Just spirited. Most are ranch and farm kids used to hard work and open spaces. Sitting still doesn't come natural to them. As they entered the town proper, Willow became aware of curious glances from people on the boardwalks. A woman sweeping outside a millinery shop stopped to stare, and 2 men loading supplies onto a wagon paused in their work. Word travels fast, the sheriff commented, seemingly unconcerned by the attention. By sundown, everyone will know the new teacher arrived with a torn skirt and had to be rescued by the sheriff. Wonderful, Willow murmured. Just the first impression I hoped to make. Sheriff Forrester guided his horse down the main street, past a saloon, a bank, the general store, and what appeared to be a doctor's office. At the far end stood a white clapboard building with a small bell tower. Your new domain, he announced, reining in his horse. School's downstairs, your living quarters upstairs. It's modest, but it's one of the newer buildings in town. He dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. His hands spanned her waist as he lifted her effortlessly to the ground. For a moment, they stood too close for propriety before he stepped back and tipped his hat. I'll have your trunk brought over as soon as it arrives, he said. Mrs. Holloway will likely stop by later to make sure you're settled. If you need anything before then, my office is just down the street, across from the general store. Willow found her voice. Thank you, Sheriff. For everything. He nodded, his expression returning to its earlier seriousness. Just doing my job, Miss O'Malley. He gathered his horse's reins. "Welcome to Cottonwood Springs." As he rode away, Willow turned to face the schoolhouse, her new home. Despite the inauspicious beginning, a sense of possibility stirred within her. This was her chance to start anew, to build something meaningful. With a deep breath, she climbed the steps and pushed open the door to her future. The schoolhouse was larger than it appeared from outside, with rows of sturdy wooden desks facing a teacher's desk and blackboard at the front of the room. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating dust motes floating in the air. A small wood stove stood in the corner, and bookshelves lined one wall, though they held only a few worn volumes. A door at the back led to a narrow staircase. Willow climbed it, wincing as her injured ankle protested, and found herself in a surprisingly pleasant apartment. The main room served as both parlor and kitchen, with a small bedroom and washroom beyond. Simple but functional furniture filled the space, and someone, Mrs. Holloway, she presumed, had indeed left a basket of food on the table, along with a pitcher of water and a note welcoming her to town. Exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed her. The journey, the accident, the encounter with the sheriff, it was all too much to process. Willow sank onto a chair and allowed herself a moment of quiet tears. She was alone in a strange town, far from everything familiar, with only her determination to sustain her. A knock at the door downstairs roused her from her moment of self-pity. Hastily wiping her eyes, she made her way back down the stairs, smoothing her hair and straightening her torn skirt as best she could. A woman in her 40s stood on the porch, plump and pleasant-looking, with graying brown hair and kind eyes. "Miss O'Malley, I'm Martha Holloway from the general store. Sheriff Forrester told me about your accident, so I brought over some things you might need." She held a bundle of fabric, which she thrust into Willow's arms. "Nothing fancy, just a simple skirt and shirtwaist to tide you over until your things arrive. Can't have our new teacher greeting her students in torn clothes, can we?" Willow was touched by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. That's very thoughtful." "Think nothing of it, dear. We're all so pleased you've come. Education's important out here, though some of the ranchers still need convincing." She peered at Willow's face. "You've had a rough day? Why don't you rest up? And tomorrow I'll introduce you around town." After Mrs. Holloway departed, promising to return in the morning, Willow's trunk arrived, delivered by Tucker and another young man. They placed it in her quarters and departed with awkward tips of their hats, clearly curious about the new teacher, but too polite to stare openly. That evening, as Willow unpacked her meager belongings and prepared a simple supper from the provisions left by Mrs. Holloway, she found her thoughts returning repeatedly to Sheriff Thornton Forrester. There was something compelling about him, not just his handsome features, but a sense of steady reliability that had made her feel safe despite the chaos of the day. Such thoughts were foolish, she told herself firmly. She had come to Cottonwood Springs to teach, to build a new life, not to moon over the local lawman like some romantic schoolgirl. Besides, a man like Sheriff Forrester surely had no interest in an Eastern schoolteacher who couldn't even arrive in town without causing a commotion. With that resolution firmly in mind, Willow prepared for bed, determined to approach her new position with the professionalism and dedication it deserved. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, the memory of strong arms around her waist and a deep voice saying, "Easy now, you're free," followed her into her dreams. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the muddy trails of yesterday already beginning to dry under the Nebraska sun. Willow rose early, dressing in the borrowed skirt and shirtwaist Mrs. Holloway had provided. The clothes were simple but clean and well made, if a bit large on her slender frame. After a breakfast of bread and jam, she decided to explore the schoolroom more thoroughly before Mrs. Holloway arrived to show her the town. The school's supplies were woefully inadequate, just a few outdated textbooks, some slates in need of repair, and a meager supply of chalk and paper. The ledger left by the previous teacher showed 27 students enrolled, ranging in age from 6 to 16, with widely varying levels of education. Some had attended school regularly in the past, while others had never had formal schooling at all. Willow was making notes on what supplies she would need to request when a knock at the door interrupted her. Expecting Mrs. Holloway, she was startled to find Sheriff Forrester standing on the porch, hat in hand. "Morning, Miss O'Malley," he greeted her. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all. Sheriff, she replied, suddenly conscious of her borrowed clothes and hair hastily pinned up. Please, come in. He stepped inside, his tall frame seeming to fill the schoolroom. Just wanted to check that you're settling in all right after yesterday's excitement. Yes, thank you. Everyone has been very kind. Mrs. Holloway even lent me these clothes until my own can be cleaned and repaired. The sheriff nodded. Martha's a good woman. Her husband passed 2 years ago, but she's kept the store running better than he ever did. He glanced around the schoolroom. I see you're already taking stock of things. Yes, the supplies seem rather limited. A smile tugged at his lips. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. Town council's been tight with funds since the last teacher left. Wanted to make sure the next one would stay before investing more. Willow straightened. Well, they needn't worry on that account. I intend to fulfill my 1-year contract, at minimum. Glad to hear it. He hesitated, then added, I actually came by with an invitation. There's a town social this Saturday evening to welcome you. Nothing fancy, just food, some music, a chance for folks to meet you properly. That sounds lovely, Willow said, genuinely pleased. I look forward to meeting everyone under more dignified circumstances than yesterday's arrival. The sheriff chuckled. Don't worry about that. People here understand that trail accidents happen. His expression grew more serious. How's your ankle? I noticed you favoring it yesterday. Surprised that he had observed what she'd tried to conceal, Willow admitted. It's a bit tender, but nothing serious. Might want to have Doc Wallace take a look. He's a good man, came out here after the war. His office is just down from the general store. I'll consider it, thank you. An awkward silence fell between them. The sheriff seemed about to say something more, then changed his mind. Well, I should let you get back to your preparations. Martha mentioned she'd be by to show you around town later. Yes, she's been very helpful. He settled his hat back on his head. If you need anything, don't hesitate to stop by my office. At the door, he paused. By the way, the social on Saturday, it's customary for me to escort the guest of honor. Would that be acceptable to you, Miss O'Malley? Willow felt a rush of warmth to her cheeks. Yes, that would be fine, Sheriff. After he left, Willow found it difficult to concentrate on her inventory. The prospect of attending the social with Sheriff Forrester was both exciting and unsettling. She reminded herself that it was merely a courtesy, not a romantic overture. But the reminder did little to calm the flutter in her chest. Mrs. Holloway arrived an hour later, and they set off to tour the town. Cottonwood Springs was larger than Willow had initially thought, with a population of nearly 500. Besides the businesses on the main street, there was a small hotel, a blacksmith, a stable, and various other establishments catering to both residents and travelers. Town's growing, Mrs. Holloway explained as they walked. The railroad's talking about putting a line through here next year, which would really bring prosperity. They stopped at the general store, where Mrs. Holloway introduced Willow to her assistant, a friendly young woman named Emma. The store was well stocked with everything from tools to fabrics, foods to medicines. Order whatever you need for the school through me, Mrs. Holloway offered. I'll put it on the town's account, though you'll need the mayor's approval for anything substantial. Their next stop was the doctor's office, where Dr. Wallace, a serious man in his 50s with kind eyes, examined Willow's ankle and pronounced it merely sprained. Stay off it as much as possible for a few days, he advised, wrapping it skillfully, and use cold compresses if it swells. As they continued their tour, they encountered many of the town's residents. Everyone was welcoming, though Willow noticed some were more reserved than others. Mrs. Holloway explained in whispered asides which families had children in school, which were influential in town politics, and which might present challenges. The Harrisons owned the largest ranch hereabouts, she said as they passed a well-dressed woman exiting the bank. They've got 3 children in school, and Mr. Harrison sits on the town council. He's got strong opinions about education, thinks boys don't need much beyond basic arithmetic and reading. Willow filed this information away for future reference. And what about Sheriff Forrester? Has he been here long? Mrs. Holloway's eyes twinkled knowingly. About 5 years now. Came from Kansas after serving in the war. He's a good man, fair, honest, and not afraid to stand up to the troublemakers who pass through. Keeps mostly to himself, though. Lives in rooms behind the sheriff's office. She hesitated, then added, there was a young woman, daughter of a rancher from the North Valley, who set her cap for him a couple years back, but nothing came of it. Some folks thought he might be carrying a torch for someone from his past, but he never speaks of it. By the time they returned to the schoolhouse, Willow's head was swimming with names and information, and her ankle was throbbing despite Dr. Wallace's treatment. Mrs. Holloway insisted she rest, promising to send over supper later. Left alone, Willow found her thoughts turning once again to Sheriff Forrester. Mrs. Holloway's comment about a possible past attachment troubled her more than it should. What did it matter to her if the sheriff nursed an old heartbreak? It was none of her concern. Yet as she sat by the window, watching the town go about its business, she found herself looking for a glimpse of him and wondering what experiences had shaped the man who had so calmly cut her free from danger the day before. The remainder of the week passed in a flurry of preparation. Willow cleaned and organized the schoolroom, repaired what supplies she could, and developed lesson plans for her diverse group of students. Mrs. Holloway and other town women stopped by regularly, bringing food, offering advice, and sharing town history. On Friday afternoon, Sheriff Forrester appeared at the schoolhouse door again, this time with a small wooden crate in his arms. "Afternoon, Miss O'Malley," he greeted her. "Thought you might be able to use these." He set the crate on her desk and stepped back, looking almost embarrassed. Inside were books, nearly 24 of them, ranging from basic primers to advanced texts on history, mathematics, and literature. Willow lifted one out reverently, running her fingers over the leather binding. "These are wonderful," she breathed. "Where did they come from?" The sheriff shrugged. "Been collecting them over the years. Thought they might do more good here than gathering dust in my rooms." Willow looked at him with new understanding. "You enjoy reading." "When time allows." He indicated a worn copy of Thoreau's Walden in the crate. "That one's a particular favorite. Something about a man finding meaning in the simplicity of nature that speaks to me." They talked about books for nearly an hour, discovering shared favorites and debating the merits of different authors. Sheriff Forrester revealed an educated mind that surprised and intrigued Willow. When he finally glanced at the clock and realized how much time had passed, he seemed almost reluctant to leave. "I should let you get back to your preparations," he said. "I'll call for you tomorrow evening at 6 for the social, if that suits you." "It does. And Sheriff, thank you for the books. They'll make a tremendous difference." He nodded, settling his hat on his head. "Thornton," he said quietly. "When it's just us, you could call me Thornton. Or Thorn, as most folks do." "Thornton," she repeated, tasting the name. "Then you must call me Willow." A smile brightened his usually serious face. "Willow it is. Until tomorrow, then." After he left, Willow sat for a long time among the books he had brought, thinking about the unexpected depths of the man who had come to her rescue on that muddy trail. Perhaps Cottonwood Springs held more promise than she had initially thought. Saturday evening arrived with a sense of anticipation that Willow had not felt in years. She had washed and pressed her best dress of forest green poplin with modest lace trim and arranged her dark auburn hair in a simple but flattering style. As she fastened her mother's cameo at her throat, she found herself hoping that Sheriff Forrester Thornton would find her appearance pleasing. "This is foolish," she told her reflection firmly. "You're a professional woman building a new life, not some silly girl hoping for romance." But the flutter in her stomach when a knock came at the door belied her stern self-admonishment. Thornton stood on her porch, looking almost unfamiliar without his usual dusty working clothes. He wore a clean black suit, white shirt, and string tie, his usually wind-blown hair neatly combed. Only the familiar star on his chest remained the same. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his blue eyes warm with admiration. "Thank you," Willow replied, suddenly shy. "You look quite handsome yourself." He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him even through the layers of clothing. They walked toward the town hall, where music and laughter already spilled from open windows into the evening air. "Nervous?" he asked, noting her tense posture. "A little," she admitted. "I want to make a good impression. These are the parents of my future students, after all." "Just be yourself," he advised. "They'll appreciate your honesty more than any pretense." The town hall was decorated with flowers and paper streamers, tables laden with food lined the walls, and a small band played cheerful tunes in one corner. It seemed the entire population of Cottonwood Springs had turned out for the occasion. Mayor William Potter, a portly man with an impressive mustache, greeted them at the door. "Miss O'Malley, welcome, welcome. We're delighted to have you join our community. He pumped her hand enthusiastically before turning to Thornton. Sheriff, good to see you out of that office for a change. What followed was a whirlwind of introductions as Thornton guided Willow through the crowd. She met ranchers and shopkeepers, farmers and craftsmen, along with their wives and children. Names and faces blurred together despite her best efforts to remember each one. Mr. Harrison, the influential rancher Mrs. Holloway had mentioned, proved to be a tall, stern-faced man with strong opinions about education that he was eager to share. Boys need practical knowledge, he stated firmly. Reading, writing, basic arithmetic enough to manage accounts and read contracts. No need for poetry and philosophy. He cast a disapproving glance at Thornton. Some folks get too many fancy ideas from books. Willow felt Thornton tense beside her, but was surprised when he remained silent, allowing her to respond. I believe all knowledge has practical applications, Mr. Harrison, she replied diplomatically. Literature teaches empathy and critical thinking. History provides context for our present circumstances, and even advanced mathematics develops problem-solving abilities that serve well in everyday life. Harrison harumphed, but seemed impressed by her poise. Well, we'll see how your methods work with our youngsters, Miss O'Malley. My three aren't the easiest students, fair warning. After he moved on, Thornton squeezed her arm approvingly. Well handled. Harrison respects people who stand their ground without being confrontational. The evening progressed pleasantly. Willow danced with the mayor, several council members, and various fathers of her future students. Each time, she found her eyes seeking out Thornton, who watched from the sidelines, occasionally speaking with townspeople, but mostly observing the festivities with his characteristic quietness. Finally, as the band struck up a waltz, he approached her. May I have this dance, Miss O'Malley? He asked formally, extending his hand. I'd be delighted, Sheriff Forrester. She replied with equal formality, though her heart raced as he led her onto the floor. His hand at her waist was warm and steady as they moved to the music. Despite his size, he danced with unexpected grace, guiding her effortlessly through the steps. You dance very well, she commented, surprised. A half-smile played across his lips. My mother insisted I learn. Said a gentleman should know how to dance properly, even if he lives on the frontier. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. A shadow crossed his face. She passed during the war, while I was away fighting. Never got to say goodbye. Willow's heart ached for him. I'm sorry. I lost my father last year. It's not easy, being unable to say farewell. They danced in silence for a moment, connected by shared grief. Then Thornton said quietly, You're making a good impression tonight. People are saying you'll be an asset to the town. I hope to be, Willow replied. I want to build something here, something meaningful. I understand that desire. His blue eyes held hers. When I came to Cottonwood Springs, I was looking for the same thing. A place to put down roots, to make a difference. And have you found it? What you were looking for? He considered her question seriously. Parts of it. The town needed law and order, and I've helped provide that. But there's more to life than just doing a job well. The music ended, and they stood for a moment, still in the dance position, until someone nearby cleared their throat. Thornton stepped back, releasing her with reluctance. Would you like some air? He asked. It's getting warm in here. They slipped outside onto the small porch of the town hall. The spring night was cool but not cold, the sky ablaze with stars that seemed close enough to touch. It's beautiful, Willow breathed, gazing upward. I've never seen so many stars. In Philadelphia, the city lights obscure most of them. That's one thing I love about the West, Thornton said, standing close beside her. The sky seems endless out here. Makes a person feel small, but part of something vast at the same time. A comfortable silence fell between them as they contemplated the heavens. Then Thornton spoke again, his voice soft. Willow, I want to be honest with you. I find myself thinking about you far more than is probably appropriate, given that we've known each other less than a week. Her heart skipped a beat. I've been thinking about you too, she admitted. He turned to face her, his expression serious in the starlight. I'm not a man of many words or grand gestures. My life is simple, sometimes dangerous, always unpredictable. I can't offer the kind of refinement you might be accustomed to in Philadelphia. I didn't come west looking for refinement, Thornton. What did you come looking for? She considered the question. Purpose. Independence. A chance to build something of my own. She met his gaze directly. And perhaps something I couldn't even name, something I didn't know I was seeking until I found myself tangled in a broken wheel and heard a voice say, "Easy now, you're free." Thornton moved closer, his hand coming up to gently touch her cheek. "May I kiss you, Willow O'Malley?" In answer, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as his arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him. When they finally parted, both were breathing unevenly. "Well," he said, a smile warming his voice, "that certainly clarifies things." Willow laughed softly, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Indeed it does." The door to the town hall opened, spilling light and music onto the porch. Mrs. Holloway appeared, her eyebrows rising at the sight of them standing so close together. "There you are," she exclaimed with poorly concealed delight. "Mayor's about to make a speech to officially welcome our new teacher. Best come inside." Thornton offered Willow his arm once more, and they followed Mrs. Holloway back into the hall, where Mayor Potter was indeed calling for attention. As they listened to his lengthy and somewhat pompous welcome speech, Thornton's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining discreetly behind the folds of her skirt. It was a small gesture, hidden from the townsfolk gathered around them. But to Willow, it felt like a promise, the beginning of something unexpected and wonderful in this dusty frontier town she was already beginning to think of as home. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect weather for the first day of school. Willow had spent Sunday preparing final details and praying for courage. Now, as she stood at the front of the schoolroom watching her students file in, she wondered if any amount of preparation could have been enough. They came in all sizes and temperaments. Shy girls with neatly braided hair, boisterous boys with scuffed boots and suspicious glances, a few older students who looked as though they'd rather be anywhere else. Among them were the three Harrison children, Robert, James, and Eliza, all with their father's stern countenance and wary eyes. "Good morning, students," Willow greeted them once all were seated. "I'm Miss O'Malley, your new teacher. I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you and helping you learn and grow this term." A few murmured responses came from the younger children, but most just stared at her with varying degrees of curiosity or indifference. Undaunted, Willow launched into her planned activities, assessments disguised as games to determine each child's educational level, introductions where each student shared something about themselves, and finally, a reading from one of the books Thornton had provided. By midday, she had a clearer picture of the challenges ahead. Some students, like 12-year-old Eliza Harrison, were well educated and eager to learn. Others, particularly several farm boys, could barely read and seemed resentful of being in school at all. The age and ability range would require careful planning to ensure everyone received appropriate instruction. As the children ate their packed lunches in the schoolyard, Willow sat at her desk reviewing her notes. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Looking up, she was pleased to see Thornton standing in the doorway. "Thought I'd check how your first morning went," he said, stepping inside and removing his hat. Willow smiled, warmth spreading through her at the sight of him. After the social on Saturday, he had walked her home and kissed her again on her porch, a lingering kiss that had left her dizzy. Sunday had been busy for both of them, with only a brief conversation after church services, but she had thought of him constantly. "It's going well, I think," she replied. "The children are," she searched for the right word. "Spirited, as you said." Thornton chuckled. "That's diplomatic." "Which ones have been giving you trouble?" "I didn't say anyone was giving me trouble. You didn't have to. I know these kids. Let me guess, Tommy Wilson was showing off. The Miller twins were passing notes, and at least one of the Harrison boys made some comment about school being a waste of time." Willow laughed, impressed by his accuracy. "Are you sure you weren't watching through the window? Just experienced in the ways of Cottonwood Springs youth." He leaned against her desk, his eyes warm as they studied her face. "You look like a proper schoolteacher today." She had dressed carefully in a high-necked blue cotton dress, her hair neatly pinned up. "Is that a compliment or an observation?" "Both. It suits you, this role, this place." He hesitated, then added more softly, "I've been thinking about Saturday night." "So have I," she admitted, color rising to her cheeks. He reached out to touch her hand where it rested on the desk. "I'd like to call on you properly, Willow. With your permission." Her heart leapt. I'd like that very much. The sound of children's voices grew louder, signaling the end of the lunch break. Thornton straightened, withdrawing his hand reluctantly. I should go? Don't want to start gossip about the sheriff spending too much time at the schoolhouse. He settled his hat back on his head. Would tomorrow evening be acceptable? I could bring supper. That would be lovely. With a nod and a smile that seemed meant only for her, he departed, passing the returning students in the doorway. Willow noticed several curious glances and one knowing smirk from Eliza Harrison. News of the sheriff's interest in the new teacher would certainly make the rounds of Cottonwood Springs by nightfall. The afternoon session proved challenging. Tommy Wilson, a freckle-faced 10-year-old, seemed determined to disrupt the class with pranks and whispered comments. By the time Willow dismissed the students at 3 o'clock, her patience was wearing thin. Mr. Wilson, please remain after class, she said as the others gathered their things. The boy slouched in his seat, defiance written across his young face as his classmates filed out. When they were alone, Willow moved to sit at the desk beside his rather than remaining at the teacher's position. Tommy, would you like to tell me why you were determined to disrupt class today? He shrugged, staring at the desktop. Wasn't disrupting nothing. I counted 7 interruptions, 3 paper balls thrown at Sarah Miller, and one rather impressive but inappropriate drawing of what I believe was supposed to be me with donkey ears. A hint of a smile tugged at his mouth before he suppressed it. Wasn't me. Tommy, Willow said gently, I'm not angry. I just want to understand. You're clearly bright. You answered every arithmetic question correctly when you thought no one was paying attention. So why pretend you're not interested in learning? The boy looked up, surprise evident in his expression. You heard those answers? I whispered them. I have good hearing. And I noticed things. She waited, letting the silence stretch between them. Finally, Tommy sighed. Pa says school's for sissies. Says I need to focus on learning ranching, not books. I see. And what do you think? He seemed startled by the question. What do I think? Yes. It's your education, after all. What do you want to learn? Tommy considered this, perhaps for the first time. I like numbers, he admitted reluctantly. And I want to learn about different places geography and such. Those are excellent subjects to study, Willow assured him. And knowing them won't make you any less capable as a rancher. In fact, understanding mathematics will help with managing livestock and finances, and geography could be useful for cattle drives and understanding markets. Hope flickered in the boy's eyes. You really think so? I know so. But Tommy, I need your help in the classroom. The younger children look up to you. When you misbehave, they think that's how they should act too. He straightened a bit at the idea of being a role model. Hadn't thought of it that way. So can I count on you to set a good example tomorrow? And perhaps help some of the younger students with their numbers? Yes, madam, he replied, suddenly earnest. I can do that. As Tommy gathered his things and hurried out, Willow felt a small sense of victory. 1 student reached, 26 more to go. It would be challenging work, but worthwhile. She was still smiling when Mrs. Holloway appeared at the door with a basket over her arm. Brought you some supper, the storekeeper announced. Figured you'd be too tired to cook after your first day. Her eyes twinkled knowingly. Saw the sheriff visiting earlier. Town's already talking. Willow accepted the basket with thanks, not surprised by the news. We're not exactly keeping it a secret that we enjoy each other's company. Mrs. Holloway beamed. It's about time Thorne found someone special. Man's been alone too long. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Whole town's been wondering what it would take to get him to settle down. Turns out all it needed was a schoolteacher with a torn skirt. Despite her embarrassment, Willow couldn't help but laugh. Mrs. Holloway, you make it sound like a fairy tale. The sheriff and I are just getting to know each other. Call me Martha, dear. And I've seen how he looks at you like a man who's found water after crossing a desert. She patted Willow's hand. Just you wait. Before the year's out, we'll be planning a wedding. After Martha left, Willow sat at her desk, pondering the older woman's words. Was her attraction to Thornton really so obvious to everyone? And was it possible he felt as strongly about her as she was beginning to feel about him? Such thoughts were premature, she told herself firmly. They had known each other barely a week. Yet there was an undeniable connection between them, a sense of recognition that defied rational explanation. When she was with him, she felt both completely safe and thrillingly alive. As spring blossomed into early summer, Willow settled into life in Cottonwood Springs. Her days were filled with teaching, and her evenings increasingly occupied by Thornton's company. He called on her regularly, bringing books or small gifts, a wildflower bouquet, maple candy from the general store, a handkerchief he had noticed her admiring. They took walks along the creek that gave the town its name, rode horseback through the surrounding countryside, once her ankle had fully healed, and spent hours in conversation on her small porch. The townsfolk watched their courtship with approval and no small amount of satisfaction. Martha Holloway had indeed been right about the gossip, but it was good-natured and supportive. Several of Willow's students had taken to giggling whenever the sheriff appeared at the schoolhouse, and Tommy Wilson, now her most enthusiastic pupil, had solemnly asked if the sheriff was sweet on her. By mid-June, Willow had to admit to herself that she was falling in love with Thornton Forrester. His steady strength, quiet intelligence, and unexpected tenderness had captured her heart completely. Yet something held him back, a reservation she sensed whenever their conversations turned to the future. One warm evening, as they sat on her porch watching fireflies rise from the grass, she finally gathered the courage to ask about it directly. "Thornton, may I ask you something personal?" He turned to her, his face half-shadowed in the fading light. "Of course. Is there a reason you seem reluctant when we speak of anything beyond the present moment? If my feelings are more engaged than yours, I would rather know now." He reached for her hand, holding it between both of his. "Willow, no. My feelings for you run deeper than I can properly express." He paused, searching for words. "But I've learned that life can change in an instant. Making plans, speaking of the future, it sometimes feels like tempting fate." "Because of the war?" she asked gently. He nodded. "Partly. I saw too many men die with futures planned, promises made that could never be kept. And after, when I returned home to find my mother gone, my father a broken man." He sighed. "I came west to escape those memories, to find purpose again. And I have, to some extent. But I've been cautious about allowing myself to hope for more." Willow squeezed his hand. "I understand caution, Thornton, but at some point, we must take risks if we want to truly live." He studied her face in the gathering twilight, then slowly reached out to trace her cheek with gentle fingers. "You're right. And you, Willow O'Malley, are a risk worth taking." He leaned forward, capturing her lips in a kiss that spoke of longing and promise. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you." The words, so simply spoken, filled her with joy. "I love you too," she whispered. That night marked a turning point in their relationship. Thornton began to speak more openly of his hopes and plans, including her in his vision of the future. They discussed the possibility of building a house on the outskirts of town, combining their small savings to purchase land where they could eventually raise a family. As the school term ended and summer settled over the plains, their courtship flourished under the approving eyes of the community. Willow found herself included in town activities and social circles, no longer the outsider, but a valued member of Cottonwood Springs. Not everyone was pleased with the changes she had brought. However, Mr. Harrison remained skeptical of her teaching methods, particularly her insistence that his sons study poetry and literature alongside more practical subjects. And there were a few town matrons who seemed to resent her quick acceptance into the sheriff's affections. These were minor concerns, though, compared to the joy she found in her work and her growing relationship with Thornton. By late July, it seemed inevitable that a proposal would soon follow, perhaps after the town's Independence Day celebration, which had been delayed due to spring flooding and rescheduled for the first weekend in August. The celebration was to be a grand affair by Cottonwood Springs standards, a parade, picnic, dance, and fireworks brought in specially from Omaha. As the schoolteacher, Willow was involved in organizing recitations by her students and helping decorate the town square. The day before the celebration, as she was hanging bunting with Martha Holloway, a rider thundered into town, his horse lathered and wild-eyed. He pulled up in front of the sheriff's office, shouting for Thornton. "Stage robbery," the man called, his voice carrying across the square. 3 miles north. 2 men shot. Willow's heart froze as Thornton emerged from his office, immediately taking charge of the situation. He spoke briefly with the messenger, then strode toward the stable to retrieve his horse. As he passed near where Willow stood, their eyes met briefly. "Be careful," she called to him. He nodded once, his expression grave. I'll return as soon as I can. Within minutes, he had gathered a small posse of men and ridden out of town, dust rising behind their horses as they galloped northward. Willow stared after them, a sense of foreboding settling over her despite the bright summer day. Don't you worry, Martha said, patting her arm. Thorn knows how to handle himself in these situations. It's probably just some drifters thinking the stage would be an easy target. Willow nodded, trying to share the older woman's confidence. Of course. He'll be back before we know it. But as the day wore on with no sign of the posse's return, her anxiety grew. She tried to focus on the celebration preparations, but her eyes kept straying to the northern road. By dusk, when there was still no word, the entire town was on edge. Mayor Potter organized a group of men to take turns watching the road, promising to send word to Willow immediately when Thornton returned. She retired to her quarters above the schoolhouse, but found sleep impossible. Every sound had her rushing to the window, hoping to see Thornton's familiar figure approaching. Dawn broke with still no news. The town reluctantly proceeded with celebration preparations, but the mood was subdued. Children hung back from their usual exuberant play, sensing the adults' tension. Willow moved through her tasks mechanically, torn between hope and dread. It was mid-morning when a lone rider appeared on the horizon. The lookout posted at the edge of town gave a shout, and people emerged from shops and homes, straining to see. As the rider drew closer, Willow's heart sank. It was Tucker, the young man who had brought the wagon after her stagecoach accident, not Thornton. He rode directly to where Willow stood with Martha and the mayor in the town square. His face was drawn, his clothes dusty from hard riding. "Miss O'Malley," he said, dismounting stiffly. "Sheriff asked me to bring you a message." "Is he all right?" she demanded, fear making her voice sharp. Tucker nodded quickly. "Yes, madam. He's fine." They tracked the robbers to a camp about 20 miles north. There was a fight, but they captured 2 of them. One of the stage passengers died of his wounds, and another's badly hurt. "Where is the sheriff now?" Mayor Potter asked. "They're bringing the wounded man and the prisoners back slow. Should arrive by nightfall." Tucker turned back to Willow. "Sheriff said to tell you he's sorry to miss the celebration, but duty comes first. Said you'd understand." Relief flooded through her, so intense she felt weak. "Yes, of course. Thank you, Tucker." The news spread quickly through town, lifting the cloud of worry. The celebration would proceed, albeit without the sheriff's presence until later. Willow threw herself into the final preparations, determined that the event would be a success despite the morning's tension. By noon, the town square was transformed. Tables laden with food lined one side. Games and contests had been set up for the children, and a small platform stood ready for speeches and performances. Farmers and ranchers from the surrounding countryside began arriving with their families, adding to the festive atmosphere. The parade began at 1 o'clock, led by Mayor Potter on horseback, followed by the town's volunteer firefighters, the children's choir, and various decorated wagons representing local businesses. Willow's students, dressed in their Sunday best, recited patriotic poems to enthusiastic applause. As afternoon mellowed toward evening, the crowd gathered for the dance, which would be followed by fireworks at full dark. Willow, wearing her best dress, a sky blue muslin with white trim, found herself partnered with various townsmen who seemed determined that she should not miss out due to Thornton's absence. She was just finishing a reel with Dr. Wallace when a murmur ran through the crowd. Turning toward the sound, she saw Thornton standing at the edge of the dance area, still in his trailed, dusty clothes, his eyes searching until they found her. Without a word to her dance partner, Willow moved through the crowd toward him. When she reached his side, he took her hand and led her away from the curious onlookers to a quiet spot beneath an old cottonwood tree. "I'm sorry I worried you," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "It took longer than expected to secure the prisoners and get everyone back safely." "You're here now," she replied, studying his face in the lantern light. There was a bruise forming on his cheek and a small cut above his eyebrow, but otherwise he appeared unharmed. "Are you all right? Tired? Hungry? In desperate need of a bath?" He managed a small smile. "But seeing you makes everything better." She reached up to touch his face gently. "You should get some rest. The celebration will continue tomorrow." He shook his head. "Not yet. I have something important to say, and I've waited long enough." Taking both her hands in his, He looked into her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Willow O'Malley, when I first saw you with your skirt tangled in that broken wheel, something inside me recognized you not just as a woman who needed help, but as the person I had been waiting for without even knowing it." Her heart began to race as he continued. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought light and purpose and joy to my days. I love you with everything I am, and if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life by your side." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring, a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "Will you marry me?" Tears of happiness blurred Willow's vision. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Thornton, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke of promises kept and a future embraced. Neither noticed the crowd that had gathered nearby until cheers and applause erupted around them. "Looks like our secret's out," Thornton murmured against her hair. Willow laughed, wiping away joyful tears. "I don't think it was ever much of a secret, Sheriff Forrester." Mayor Potter pushed through the crowd, beaming broadly. "Well now, this calls for a proper celebration. Sheriff Forrester and Miss O'Malley are engaged to be married." More cheers followed this announcement. Martha Holloway appeared with tears in her eyes to hug them both, while Tucker and several other young men slapped Thornton on the back in congratulation. Even Mr. Harrison offered gruff good wishes. "When's the wedding to be?" someone called from the crowd. Thornton looked at Willow questioningly. "We haven't discussed that yet." "August," she said decisively, "before the new school term begins." His eyes widened in surprise. "That's less than a month away." "Too long," she replied with a smile. "But I suppose I need some time to prepare." The fireworks that night seemed especially brilliant to Willow, exploding against the velvet sky in cascades of color as she stood within the circle of Thornton's arm, her head on his shoulder and her heart full to bursting with happiness. The ring on her finger caught the flashes of light, sending tiny rainbows dancing across their joined hands. The wedding took place on the last Saturday in August, a perfect late summer day with gentle breezes and a sky so blue it hurt to look at it. The entire town turned out for the occasion, filling the small church to capacity and spilling onto the grounds outside. Willow wore a gown of ivory silk, ordered from Omaha with Martha's assistance, with lace at the collar and cuffs that had once adorned her mother's wedding dress. Her hair was arranged in soft curls adorned with small white flowers, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers gathered that morning by her students. Thornton, standing at the altar in a new black suit, watched with wonder as she walked toward him on Mayor Potter's arm. His blue eyes never left hers as they spoke their vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared joyfully. "Sheriff Forrester, you may kiss your bride." Their kiss was both tender and passionate, sealing their union before God and the community they had come to love. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, Willow felt a sense of completion, of having found her true home. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with feasting and dancing and speeches both emotional and humorous. When they finally departed for Thornton's rooms behind the sheriff's office, their temporary home, until the small house they were building at the edge of town was completed, the entire town lined the street to wish them well. Later, as they lay in each other's arms, Willow marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if my stagecoach hadn't broken down that day?" she asked, tracing the line of Thornton's jaw with gentle fingers. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "I believe we would have found each other somehow. But I'm grateful for that broken wheel and your tangled skirt." He smiled against her skin. "It gave me the chance to free you, only to lose my own heart in the process." "Not lost," she corrected, moving closer to him in the darkness. "Given, as I've given mine to you." "Forever," he agreed, gathering her more tightly in his arms. "For always." 5 years later, Willow stood on the porch of their home, watching as Thornton rode up the lane, their 3-year-old son Thomas seated proudly before him on the saddle. Behind them, the setting sun painted the Nebraska sky in shades of gold and rose, the same colors that touched the fields of wheat surrounding their property. Their house, once just a dream discussed on summer evenings, was now a comfortable reality, a 2-story frame structure with a wide porch, surrounded by gardens Willow had planted herself. Nearby stood a small stable for their horses, a chicken coop, and a workshop where Thornton pursued his woodworking hobby during the quiet winter months. As they drew closer, Willow smiled at Thomas's excited chatter and Thornton's patient responses. Their son had his father's blue eyes and her auburn hair, along with a curious mind and adventurous spirit that kept them both constantly on their toes. Inside, their 1-year-old daughter Eleanor slept peacefully in her cradle, having exhausted herself with her recently discovered ability to crawl at remarkable speeds. Named for Thornton's mother, she had her father's quiet intensity and watchful nature. Life in Cottonwood Springs had changed substantially in 5 years. The railroad had indeed come through as promised, bringing growth and prosperity to the once small town. Willow still taught at the school, though now with an assistant to help manage the increased enrollment. Thornton had trained several deputies and was considering running for county sheriff in the coming election. They had witnessed marriages and births, deaths and departures among their neighbors. Tommy Wilson, now 17, had graduated from Willow's school and gone on to college in Omaha, the first from Cottonwood Springs to pursue higher education. Martha Holloway had sold her store to her assistant Emma, but remained a beloved figure in town, a doting honorary grandmother to Thomas and Eleanor. As Thornton dismounted and lifted their son down from the saddle, Willow felt the familiar wave of gratitude that often overtook her at such ordinary moments. Their life together wasn't perfect. They had weathered disagreements, dangers, and disappointments like any couple, but it was rich with love and purpose. "Mama," Thomas called, racing toward her with arms outstretched. "Papa showed me the new foals at Mr. Harrison's ranch. They're so small." She caught him in a hug, lifting him despite his growing weight. "Did he now? What color are they?" As Thomas launched into a detailed description, Thornton approached more slowly, his smile warm as he leaned in to kiss his wife. "How was your day?" he asked, his hand resting comfortably at the small of her back. "Peaceful. Eleanor took a good nap. I finished grading the older students' essays, and Mrs. Peterson brought over some fresh bread." She studied his face, reading the contentment there that matched her own. "And yours?" "Productive. No troubles in town. All quiet on the outlying farms." He glanced toward the house. "Is there time before supper for me to show you something? I finished it this afternoon." Curious, Willow set Thomas down. "Go wash up for supper, sweetheart. You can tell me more about the foals at dinner." Once Thomas had scampered inside, Thornton took Willow's hand and led her toward his workshop. Inside, covered with a cloth, stood something large and rectangular. "What is it?" she asked, intrigued by the secretive smile on his face. With a flourish, he pulled away the cloth to reveal a beautiful wooden desk, its surface polished to a warm glow, with drawers on either side and a center compartment perfectly sized for books and papers. "It's for your birthday next week," he explained, running his hand lovingly over the smooth surface. "I know you've been wanting a proper desk for your lesson plans and writing." Willow circled the desk in wonder, admiring the craftsmanship and attention to detail. Each drawer pull was hand-carved, and along the front edge, almost hidden unless you looked closely, he had engraved a single phrase: "Easy now, you're free." Tears sprang to her eyes as she traced the words with her fingertip. "It's perfect, Thornton. Absolutely perfect." He came to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist as he rested his chin on her shoulder. "Happy?" She turned in his embrace to face him, cupping his beloved face between her hands. "Completely. I never imagined, when I set out for the West with nothing but hope and determination, that I would find such happiness." "Nor did I," he admitted, "when I rode out to help a stagecoach in distress, expect to find the woman who would change my life forever." Their lips met in a kiss as sweet and promising as the one they had shared at the altar 5 years before, a kiss that spoke of a love that had only deepened with time and the shared joys and challenges of building a life together. Outside, the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the Nebraska sky in twilight hues. Inside, surrounded by the home they had created and the family they cherished, Willow and Thornton Forrester held each other close. Their journey from that fateful meeting on a muddy trail to this moment of quiet contentment, a testament to the enduring power of love discovered in the most unexpected circumstances. From a broken wheel and a tangled skirt had come freedom not just from immediate danger, but from loneliness, from fear of the future, from lives half-lived. In each other, they had found wholeness, purpose, and a love that would sustain them through all the seasons of their lives together on the ever-changing, ever-challenging, ever-beautiful frontier.